Hi, I'm Mac, and I'm going to take you on another awesome adventure deep in the woods of this beautiful country we live in. Today, we're going to learn how they take trees out of the forests and woods and cut them up into all sorts of different sizes. This is where the wood comes from, that makes all of the things that surround us in our daily lives. The houses we live in, the kitchen tables we eat at, the beds we sleep in, even the pencils we write with. And this is where it all begins, at the sawmill. And you know, I think today is my day to become a lumberjack. My good friend Tom here runs the sawmill, and I think he's going to let me try some stuff. Well, here we are in the great North Woods, standing in the middle of this beautiful forest. Now, today's the day the sawmill people decide which trees to cut down. And the number one thing they think about when deciding which tree to cut is forest management. They want to leave plenty of healthy trees for the animals to roam in, for us to camp in, and for more trees to grow later. The first thing that's done after choosing the trees is to spray them so the men cutting them down know which ones to take. In order for the sawmill to get the big equipment they need deep into the forest, they have to make trails, or logging roads as they call them. They use a bulldozer to knock over trees to make the logging roads. These big trucks haul the heavy equipment from job to job. Once the bulldozer is on the ground, look out, the trees are going to fall. Now that the logging roads are in, we can start cutting down the trees. In the olden days, they used to use one of these babies to cut down trees. But oh, times have changed. This machine's called a processor. It's kind of like a big monster with claws and a chainsaw thing connected to it. Grabs onto the trees, cuts them, and slings them to the ground. Once the processor gets them to the ground, it rips the limbs off and cuts the trees into nice little piles. This machine is really cool. You can spin around in it, just like a ride at the fair. You know, like the octopus or a tilt-a-whirl. The guy that drives it has these two robot-like handles that let you turn left and right, up and down, even sideways if you want to. Let's take a look inside the cab. Come on up! Wow, this would be a really cool job.
Mac, you look a little flustered. What's wrong?
Nothing. Nothing at all. Now that the processor has cut down these trees and built these nice little piles, it's time to move these trees from deep in the forest to a holding area called a landing, where the trees are stacked into huge log piles. Oop, here's something coming. Oh, this thing doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. This is called a skidder. It has this really long arm with a clamp on it. Kind of reminds me of those little machines you might see at a store where you can try and pick up stuffed animals.
Mr. Operator! Suppose I could give that a try?
Sure, come on up. You sure know how to run it?
Oh, sure. Take it from here!
Okay, now that they've moved all these logs to the landing, it's time to load them up and move them to the sawmill. This baby's called a loader truck, with what they call a pup trailer attached behind to haul even more logs. When you're in the woods, sometimes it gets a little tough to turn this big truck around. And after you do get the truck in position, the driver has to make sure the truck is secure. These things, called stabilizers, keep the truck nice and level. It looks like we're ready to load up.
Hey, Mac, I gotta go in the woods for a minute, talk to Tom. Be back in a minute.
Good. He's gone. You know, my favorite thing about this truck is that cool little seat up there.
you do to my truck?
Well, here we are at the sawmill. First thing we're going to do is take a walk around and see where everything is. Come on! Woo! They got some massive log piles around here. I wonder if Tom would mind if I climbed on one.
Hey, have you seen Matt? I wonder where he is.
Da, 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 da. I can see your house from here. After the loader truck has dropped off his load from the woods, it's time to move these logs into the first building. They use this thing called a forklift. It has these big forks that can move around and lift things to different positions. Tom said I could help in the demonstration on how to properly pick logs up off the pile. Hey, it's not my fault. Somebody stacked the pile wrong. Okay, now that the wood is at the sawmill, it's time to start cutting. The very first thing they do is cut a log into a square. They call it a cant. This machine, known as the log turner, helps to get the log in position for a new cut. The sawyer sits way up here in this booth. Wow, look at these controls! A red laser beam will determine where each cut will be made on the log. Once the log is cut into a square cant, the outer layer, known as the bark, goes down this chute and is ground up in the chipper. From there, it's hauled away to a factory where they'll burn it to help make energy. The square cants go down this chute, where an inspector looks at the wood and decides what it will be made into next. The bigger pieces go this way, and the smaller pieces go this way. In order to have nice straight piles that are the same size, these pieces will now go through another saw called an edger. The edger makes every piece alike. All this cutting creates an awful lot of sawdust, but even the sawdust is useful. These big blowers take the sawdust and blow it into sawdust trailers. The sawdust will be hauled away to be used to make particle board. After the logs are all cut up in building number 1, the wood is stacked so it can be moved to a new building. In the new building, it will be cut up some more.
Hey, Mac, take a minute for lunch.
Only a minute for lunch?
Yummy!
Do not try this at home. Whew. It's time for the crew to get back to work. These forklifts will move the wood again. This stack of wood is going to building number 2, where it will be processed further. In this building, they've got some really cool saws. Saws that cut up and down, even sideways. Look at this saw. It's the biggest chainsaw I've ever seen. It can cut a whole stack of wood all at one time. One of the things they make at this sawmill are stakes. Stakes are generally pounded in the ground to mark things or to hold something down. If you've ever been camping, then you've used a stake to hold down the tent. A stake needs a point, and this saw can cut both sides of the point at the same time. This saw is called a bandsaw. It has a long, thin blade that's a circle, which goes around and around. It can cut wood into nice, thin pieces. Let's take a look at these saws in action. With all the cutting that goes on at the sawmill, the blades on these saws get dull and need to be sharpened on a regular basis. This is the building where they sharpen the blades. Whoa, look at the size of that blade! Just once I'd like to...
ready to move on?
Yeah, sure. When winter comes, it gets awfully cold. And I don't know about you, but I like to sit around a nice warm fire. In this building, they make firewood. They cut it, split it, and load it on the truck to be delivered. I'll bet some of your dads would like to have this set up. Well, once the wood is cut to order, it has to be properly bundled so it can be shipped. This is called a banding machine. It puts a tight strap around the bundle of wood so nothing will get loose during shipping. Let's load them up. The forklifts load the wood into these big trailers to be shipped all over the place. This load is headed for Chicago.
Well, that pretty much takes care of our adventure for today. But I thought I'd bring you back out here into the forest to see a finished job. You see, the sawmill people have left lots of trees behind. That way we'll have a healthy forest in the future.
Hey, I had fun, and I hope you did too. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you next time for another awesome adventure.